Osama bin Laden, the world's most wanted man, until his death in May 2011. Over the years, Al Jazeera's bureau chief in Islamabad, Ahmed Zaidan, has interviewed numerous people who met bin Laden and his associates. This is the story of bin Laden through their eyes. In May 1998, Osama bin Laden and his associates held a press conference calling for the killing of Americans. Several months later, bomb attacks on the US embassies in Kenya and Tanzania killed 12 Americans and almost 300 Africans. In response, the United States launched cruise missiles against sites in Sudan and Afghanistan, believed to be linked to bin Laden. Just before the cruise missiles were launched, a top American general arrived in Pakistan. His mission was to inform Pakistan's top brass of the US intention to send missiles over its territory to hit targets in Afghanistan. The Americans wanted the Pakistanis to know the missiles were not Indian. They were afraid the cruise missile attacks might inadvertently trigger a full-scale war between Pakistan and India, two nuclear powers.
The chief of the Eastern Command, he came, landed in Islamabad airport, asked for a dinner, evening meeting with Jahangir Karamat, who was our army chief, and they had dinner at the airport. And he told them at that time that we are about to fire some missiles into Afghanistan, and I've come to inform you so you don't think they've come from somewhere else, and please inform your government. So, but it was just half an hour before it. So basically it was a fait accompli, and they virtually took us for granted that they have to approach Afghanistan. It's a landlocked country.
Pakistan had failed to convince the Taliban to turn over Osama bin Laden. The Americans had demanded bin Laden be expelled. The Pakistanis inquired. The Taliban refused. Following the 1998 bomb attacks in East Africa, bin Laden's name moved higher up on America's most wanted list. The CIA set up a bin Laden unit, and the US offered a reward of $5 million for information about bin Laden's whereabouts. Several years later, that reward increased significantly.
Mr. Chairman, as the members of this August House are aware, the United States has carried out strikes inside Afghanistan and Sudan.
Pakistan's foreign minister at the time spoke before an angry parliament, enraged by the US missile strike and what they saw as a violation of Pakistani sovereignty.
Preliminary information suggests that the missile attacks has resulted in loss of innocent lives, which is a cause for serious concern.
Until then, Pakistani officials had heard little from the outside world about the exploits of the Saudi-born leader.
Now, the surprising thing is, be it Rafael, be it Albright, be it Bill Richardson, Clinton, starting from Japan right up to Washington, I traveled all these capitals and met my counterpart. Never was the name Osama bin Laden mentioned to me.
I think until the bombings in East Africa in 1998, the CIA certainly underestimated him. After that, we were the loudest heralds of warning for the US government.
In December 1999, Indian Airlines Flight 814 was hijacked by gunmen and forced to land in Kandahar in Afghanistan. The hijackers, believed to be Pakistani, demanded India release certain militants it was holding. They were militants who were known to be close to Al-Qaeda. They included Omar Saeed Sheikh and Masood Azhar.
المهم يوم عملية وصول الطائرة مطار قندهار يعني الشيخ أسامة قال جهز صواريخك، فكان صواريخ الستنجر موجودة عندنا، قال جهزوا الصواريخ، فجهزنا الصواريخ وشدينا طواري في المكان كذا، ما في موضوع ساعة زمان نصف ساعة إلا والطائرة محلقة فوق المجمع واصلة مطار قندهار، فأنا لمحت العلامة الطائرة العلامة مو غريبة يعني، وبعدين مكتوب فيها اسم الهند وكذا، فقلت إيش القصة؟ لما نزلت الطائرة لاحظنا تحرك قوات طالبان في المكان، فوصلني خبر قالوا هاي طائرة وصلت واحتمال في طائرة تأتي بعدها، احتمال يصير فوضى في المكان، يمكن تأتي قوات خاصة هندية ويصير اقتحام للطائرة وكذا بدون استئذان طالبان، فاستعدوا. فوصلهم 4 أو 5 أشخاص تم إطلاقهم من داخل الهند، فوصلوا إلينا، فنحن كنا بنشاهد بالمناظير والأشياء هذه، فلاحظنا عملية استقبال يعني حافل وخروج مطار قندهار بالرمايات والرصاص، فقلنا يا جماعة لا يمكن إطلاق أسير بهذه الطريقة إلا القصة فيها شيء. فتقريبا بعدها بيومين أو 3 أيام الشيخ أسامة بن لادن استدعى ملا أصغر وبعض مسؤولي طالبان، وقامت يعني وليمة كبيرة لهم في مطار قندهار في مجمع، وتعرفنا على ملا مسعود أصغر وجلسنا معه وعرفنا تاريخ طويل جدا بين الاثنين، يعني طلع ملا مسعود أصغر والشيخ أسامة في بينهم علاقة قديمة.
تلغيم التبة وتمويه تماما يتم نصر المجاهدين أنتم طبعا إلى التبة رقم 1.
Bin Laden's prominence in Afghanistan was increasing. Al-Qaeda was gaining credibility among its Afghan allies. It offered the Taliban bomb-making experts, experienced fighters, and money for operations. From its shelter in Afghanistan, Al-Qaeda sought revenge for the US cruise missile attacks. It chose a daring strike against a symbol of American power. In October 2000, a small boat charged with explosives was driven into the USS Cole warship off the Yemeni port of Aden. The suicide bombers were killed, along with 17 American sailors. Bin Laden's showdown with America was intensifying. Back in 1998, he had called on Muslims to kill Americans, including civilians. But his animosity to America dated back 8 years earlier, when US forces deployed in Saudi Arabia following Iraq's invasion of Kuwait in 1990. Bin Laden accused the Americans of desecrating what he called holy Arab soil.
He said, I'm opposed to the presence of foreign troops in Saudi Arabia for 2 reasons, Islamic reasons and patriotic reasons. Patriotic because he said, I don't want my homeland to be occupied by foreign troops. Secondly, Islamic reasons because he said that, there's Mecca and Medina, the holiest places for Muslims, and we don't want non-Muslim troops nearby.
I think it was the entry of the United States military forces and Western forces generally into Saudi Arabia in 1990-91 was kind of the turning point for Osama bin Laden in 2 ways. First, it kind of cemented his animosity toward the United States, but it also completed his alienation from the Saudi government. He figured that any Muslim Islamic government that it could invite Western forces into the home of the Prophet is really not a government that he would want to support.
Nasser al-Bahri, a former bodyguard of bin Laden, revealed to Al Jazeera that the attack on the USS Cole was originally intended to take place further out at sea.
الشيخ أسامة كانت الخطة أن تضرب في المياه الدولية، لأن الشيخ أسامة كان يريد يبعد الدول العالم العربي، أنه حقيقة الصراع هو مع الغرب ولا يريد أن يدخل الشرق الأوسط أو الدول الإسلامية العربية طرف في هذا الصراع. فكانت الخطة ضربها في المياه الدولية حتى ترفع الضغط عن حكومة اليمن أو غيرها من الدول، لأنه كول مرت بدول عربية كثير جدا من جبل طارق ومضيق باب وقناة السويس وقبرص وباب المندب، فكان في عملية تجنيب لضربها في المياه الدولية. ولكن صار في خطأ فني بسيط اللي هو عملية الرقابة، مراقبة له توقيتية، فما انتبه المنفذين إلى السفينة في وسط ميناء عدن فتعجلوا في الضرب وضربوها وسط ميناء عدن.
further pressure increased on the Taliban to control bin Laden. Taliban representatives were approached by US officials to discuss ways bin Laden might be handed over. In the end, the diplomatic efforts proved fruitless. But Taliban leader Mullah Omar did impose restrictions on bin Laden, forbidding him to talk to the media without the consent of the Taliban. The Al-Qaeda leader asked a senior figure in Pakistan to intervene.
आप ज़रा मुल्ला साहब को समझा दें कि मुझे पाबंद न बनाए। मैं फ़लस्तीनियों की जंग लड़ता हूँ या वो तो हमारा जिहाद का हिस्सा है। तो मैंने कहा मुल्ला उमर ख़ुद बहुत बड़ा मुजाहिद है, वो आपको वो नहीं, ये नहीं कि वो चाहता नहीं है, वो सब कुछ चाहता है, लेकिन वो अपने मुश्किलात को संभालने में लगा हुआ है। तो बहरहाल उसने कहा तुम मुल्ला उमर को कह दो। फिर मैंने मुल्ला उमर को ख़त भेजा। मैं तो यहाँ करीम मिला तो वापस आ गया। फिर मैंने एक आदमी भेजा और बड़ा लंबा ख़त लिखा कि शेख उसामा से वो कोई तकरीबकारी तो नहीं करता है, अपने अरबों को कम से कम एक पैगाम देता है, पहुँचाता है आवाज़। तो बहरहाल उसके बाद शायद कुछ पाबंदी पर कम हो गई थी।
Shortly after the attack on the USS Cole, Al Jazeera's Ahmed Zaidan was invited to the wedding of bin Laden's son, marrying the daughter of Mohammed Atef, Al-Qaeda's military commander. Given the Taliban restrictions imposed upon him, these social occasions were a way for bin Laden to deliver his statement to the media.
وفي عدن هبوا وشدوا ودمروا مدمرة يخشى أولو البأس بأسها تزيدك رعبا حين ترسو وتبحر.
Coordination between Yemen and the United States increased. American military exercises were held in the area. Almost 2 years to the day after the USS Cole was bombed, a duplicate attack took place. An explosive-laden boat rammed into a French oil tanker in the Gulf of Aden off Yemen. Al-Qaeda claimed responsibility for the attack.
دولة الطالبان وهذا أميرهم أمير المؤمنين الملا.
Despite Mullah Omar's restrictions on bin Laden, the relationship between the Taliban leader and the Al-Qaeda leader appeared to be strong, even though they had known each other for only a few years. It was a relationship noticed by a Pakistani journalist who had interviewed bin Laden.
वो क्योंकि इंटरव्यू ख़त्म हो गया था, जब उन्हें पता लगा कि आ रहे हैं मुल्ला उमर आ रहे हैं, तो वो जैसे ही मतलब दरवाजे में पहुंचे तो ये बाहर पहले ही निकल चुके थे। मतलब इतला जैसे ही मिली ना, तो जैसे ही एंट्रेंस होती है वो खुद चल के गए उनसे मिलने के लिए, मुल्ला उमर से मिलने के लिए खुद गए, गले मिले उनसे, फिर हम लोगों का तारुफ करवाया। जिस तरह वो आए उस समय तो बड़ा गहरा ताल्लुक़ लगता था और बड़े सादे से, मतलब मैं नहीं एक्सेप्ट कर रहा था कि वो ये मुल्ला उमर होंगे।
The collaboration between the Taliban and Al-Qaeda seemed to benefit bin Laden more.
Osama bin Laden was benefited more because he needed shelter and shelter was provided. He was a man in exile. There was restriction on him and he could not move anywhere. Probably his accounts were also frozen. I mean, he could not provide much of help to Mullah Omar, except few of his colleagues who were with him to support Taliban in some military training, etc.
Many people were blaming him, including myself. I also wrote against Mullah Omar in 1996. I accept the responsibility today that I wrote that he is playing an American game, because many American diplomats in Islamabad and Benazir Bhutto, she was Prime Minister at that time, and she was also supporting Mullah Omar. Because Benazir Bhutto was supporting Mullah Omar, so I thought that maybe he is working for Americans. And I wrote some columns against him that maybe Mullah Omar is playing an American game. So I was invited by Mullah Omar, and he told me that I am not an American agent. So if I am an American agent, why I have given refuge to an enemy of America whose name is Osama bin Laden?
A bond of loyalty had developed between Mullah Omar and bin Laden. In 1998, bin Laden's Arab fighters had helped Taliban forces conquer the city of Mazar al-Sharif, the last major city in Afghanistan to fall to the Taliban. Al-Qaeda had also fought alongside the Taliban against its arch enemy, the renowned guerrilla fighter Ahmed Shah Massoud. Bin Laden's former bodyguard remembers fighting Massoud's forces advancing on Kabul.
المعركة هي طبعا بفضل الله أتكلم عن هذا الموضوع وأنا كنت أحد المشاركين في هذه المعركة. سقطت خط الجبهة بالكامل. الجبهة بالكامل سقط، انسحب الباكستانيين والتركمان انسحبت جميع الأجناس. وما بقي إلا جبل المهند. وبقينا فوق 6 أنفار فقط، ما في غيرنا، 6 أشخاص بالحساب. كان مننا الأخ أبو الفرج الليبي فك الله أسره، كان معنا الأخ سيف العدنس الله يحفظه، كان معنا الأخ محمد داود العوهري المعتقل في عملية نيروبي دار السلام. فمن الستة أصيب 4 فبقي 2. بقينا مشتبكين مع العدو من صلاة الفجر إلى 12 ظهرا. فأحمد شاه مسعود وقواته لما شافوا طبعا معنا كان معنا دبابة خربانة يعني، حتى الدبابة كانت عطلانة بس احنا قلنا يا ولد اضرب القذيفة وخلاص. ومع ذلك أوقفنا تقدم أحمد شاه مسعود. فهذا الموقف وهذا التصرف حملوه الأفغان لنا كنوع من الجميل. ووصل خبر إلى قندهار. فالملا محمد عمر عرف حقيقة إيمان هؤلاء الشباب وحقيقة أنه نحن ما ننظر لأفغانستان أنها بس بلد تأوينا، وإنما هي جزء من بلدنا.
It appeared to some observers, who were key players in events at the time, that bin Laden had considerable influence over his Taliban allies.
I noticed a kind of helplessness in the sense that Mullah Omar was guiding the whole thing, and he was in Kandahar and not in Kabul, and obviously he was under the influence of Osama bin Laden there. So it was quite a sort of low-key interaction with the Americans. They were not pressurizing us, they were just telling us, look, our support for the Taliban and Afghanistan can't last long unless they can solve the Osama problem.
Bin Laden seemed to have increasing sway. He had reportedly prevailed over Mullah Omar and convinced him to destroy the historic statues of Buddha carved into a cliff in the Bamiyan Valley in the Hindu Kush Mountains of central Afghanistan. The destruction of the statues in March 2001 led to worldwide condemnation and further isolation of the Taliban by the international community.
I told him that Japan gives you a lot of aid, humanitarian aid, and many of the Japanese are Buddhists. Why you want to break these statues and annoy them? They are ready to cut these and re-erect them somewhere. They are ready to put a wall against them so that nobody worships them. But I mean, he had his own conviction about Islamic order, and he thought what he was doing was a great model for Islamic countries to follow.
بدمي أسطر قصتي وجهادي
As bin Laden strengthened his influence over the Taliban in Afghanistan, he also maintained contacts with religious ulema, or clerics, in neighboring Pakistan. He would invite clerics close to the Taliban to visit him in order to discuss ideological matters. One of these scholars was the father of Abdul Rashid Ghazi, the Imam of the Lal Masjid, or Red Mosque, in Islamabad.
In fact, few ulamas were invited by Osama bin Laden in 1998 in Kandahar, and among them my father was also invited. And while he was going there, I went with him. to Kandahar. And in Kandahar we met, we spent the whole day with Osama. He was against America. Another point was that, there is a saying of the Prophet that oust these Yahud and Nasara from the holy places. So that was the basic idea.
Prior to the attacks on September 11, 2001, bin Laden was called to a high-level meeting with the Taliban. They expressed to bin Laden their frustration with Ahmed Shah Massoud, whose forces represented the only cohesive military opposition to the Taliban, and the only such group to be taken seriously in the West.
بأن حركة طالبان في أثناء رحلة العودة لأحمد شاه مسعود من الغرب وعودته إلى أفغانستان اجتمعوا اجتماع مجلس القيادة العليا لحركة طالبان واستدعوا الشيخ أسامة بن لادن في هذا الموضوع وعرضوا عليه الموضوع. قالوا كيف الحل؟ فالشيخ أسامة بن لادن عرض عليه الموضوع وقال له أنا أحل المشكلة، فسمحوا له وأعطوه مثل بقول تفويض كامل، افعل ما هم لائق. فكان الحل الأمثل عملية توقيت، وهي حتى لو لاحظنا هي عملية اغتيال أحمد شاه مسعود في 9 سبتمبر وضربة أحداث سبتمبر، ضرب الأبراج أو غزوتين نيويورك وواشنطن في 11 سبتمبر، فرق بينهم 24 ساعة فقط.
September 11, 2001. The Holy War, or Jihad, which bin Laden had declared against the United States 3 years earlier, in 1998, had now arrived on the streets of America.
وبعد تلك الضربات العظيمة التي ضربت أمريكا.
The 9/11 attacks sparked a chain reaction of events. America demanded bin Laden be handed over. The Taliban refused. America went to war. The Taliban were ousted from power. It was some years later before bin Laden claimed direct responsibility for the attacks.
فأنا المسؤول عن تكليف الإخوة 19 رحمهم الله بتلك الغزوات، ولم أكلف الأخ زكريا بأن يكون معهم في تلك المهمة، وأن اعترافه بأنه كان مكلفا بالمشاركة في تلك الغزوات اعتراف باطل لا يشك عاقل أنه نتيجة للضغوط التي مورست عليه